Hi guys, welcome back. So I've literally just bought this Mini Cooper S John Cooper Works. I've only paid £1,750 for this car, which I think is an absolute bargain. Of course, it's a car that I've bought and it's going to need fixing. So the story with this car is I went to go and view this off a private seller on a Saturday. He said that it had a head gasket issue. Checked the oil cap, nothing coming from there. I took on a test drive. I checked the coolant cap, I took it off and just started the car from cold. It was cold when I got there and there was nothing coming out of it. So I thought, that's a bit strange. It looks okay to me. But I thought, okay, that's fine to drive back. It's worth the risk when I'm going to try and drive back. It'll be fine to drive back. Much to my despair, it wasn't. Anyway, on the way back when I was driving this car, it overheated and it dropped all of its coolant literally halfway on the way back, and I was about an hour from home. So what I ended up having to do, I had to get the car trailered back. But what I could see underneath the car is that there's a massive puddle of coolant basically from the back of the engine, which is, I'm pretty sure, where the water pump is. But the water pumps in these apparently are like a known fault anyway. I'm going to fix the water pump on the car, but of course after I've done the water pump I'm just going to double check everything's okay. We're going to leave the head gasket anyway. And there are other things of course on the car that we need to fix. You can probably see right here, someone's tried to paint this black to make it look like one of the new Minis, is what I think anyway. Try and get that off and get it back to white. And this light here is a bit flimsy and it's about to fall off basically. Might do that in a sec anyway. So I'm going to quickly walk around the car and show you some of the nice stuff. There we go. So I'm going to quickly show you around the car before I do the water pump. It's a bit wiggly and it's not very good. I think it's broken on the back of it. So that's another thing we're going to need to fix. But the good things on the car, it's got some, what I believe are like optional extra split rims on the car. I think they're Ronald split rims or something like that. John Cooper Works wheels. And as you can probably tell by this, it's got the John Cooper Works kit fit from factory. It's got some checkers on here, which I don't think they're too bad anyway. I think that's kind of cool. Right then, so for the inside, as you can see, it's quite a nice spec from factory. Got black leather seats. I think there's some sort of aftermarket checker mats. I'm not too keen on them, but they kind of go with the checkers on the wing anyway. Also, it's got a black roof line, which I don't think all of these have, which is nice as well. Lovely little detail of having that John Cooper Works badging down there, which is always nice. Not really much we're going to do to the interior anyway. Might just change the mats, give it a good clean here. But the main things are on the outside of the car anyway. Right, around the back then, someone's put a carbon splitter on it and it doesn't look too great. As you can see, it's got lacquer peel on it. It looks a bit worse for wear anyway. That's something that we're going to sort out. A standard like Cooper S exhaust on it at the minute, which I think doesn't really, complete the car anyway. I'm going to get a John Cooper Works one, spice it up a little bit. But they're only cheap, so I'm going to get one of them and it'll just kind of complete the car a little bit more as well. It's got parking sensors, stuff like that. What we're going to do is going to sort the water pump out on the car, check everything's okay mechanically, and then we can clean it up. And of course, then we can get some good pictures of it and put it up for sale. Anyway, first things first, what we're going to do is jack the car up and then we can have a look at the water pump, swap it out, fix it, change it, replace it and check it. Right then, so we've got the car jacked up now. Now the water pump itself is behind here. What I'm going to have to do is get this off and get this out of the way, and then we can really have a look at what's actually gone on with this car. Right, now I've got the arch line out of the way, we can really see what's going on here. This here is like the friction wheel, which is kind of like the tensioner and pulley for the water pump. And that there, that silver disc, is the pulley for the water pump itself. The room here is pretty limited, but what I'm going to try and do is up the top, there's the engine mount, which I'm going to try and take off and get out of the way, and then I'm going to try and put a block of wood, try and hold this up in place and jack it up so we can make our life a little bit easier. Anyway, let's go up top and undo that engine mount. Right then, so to gain access to the water pump, we're always going to have to take this boost pop off and get that out of the way. Try and undo that clip there, slide that out of the way, and down here there's a couple of bolts we're going to have to undo. You can pull this out of the way and get access to that engine mount. Down there is the end of the water pump. Okay then, so now we've got the engine mount and the boost pipe out and drops it down, it gives us a lot more access to actually get to the water pump. Right then, so as you can see here, we've got a lot better access to everything under here compared to when the engine was higher up. And we can actually fit spanners on here now, and here there's just enough room to get an impact gun on to get this off, which is what I'm going to do. Going to get the water pump pulley off and the tensioner for it basically. Okay then, so now I've got all of this stuff off. I can see that someone's already changed it before. The pulley itself, that looks fine to me in my opinion, so we're going to leave that as it is. The main concern is the water pump. I don't know if you can see it, but if I was to turn, you can see that it's slightly warped basically, so that's definitely scrap in my opinion. I think it's plastic or something, it's crap quality, but the new one I've got is Ali anyway, so that should hopefully solve that issue. What's basically happened is that's warped and that's caused all of the problems basically from the heat. Anyway, another thing that I've noticed under here, I've taken everything off, is if you have a look in there, there's a coolant pipe at the back and it looks like that started to break off and split. So that is another thing that I'm going to try and source before I put everything back together. But I basically took the end of it off and all of this stuff came with it basically. I'm going to try and get another one of them for, I think it goes to the thermostat. So another thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually do the thermostat in the car as well, because they're only cheap, and I may as well do it now because I've got to take that thermostat housing pipe off, which is just at the back. That's the one that I've just showed you, which is on the inside of the water pump, which looks damaged. And so I've got the inlet manifold off now, and it's fairly easy to get off, especially when the engines forward. It's only about 5 bolts here, a few plugs, a few, you know, kind of like vacuum connectors. Anyway, what I've noticed now I've taken that off is down here you can see that the coolant has actually been leaking out the back of this pipe. This is definitely leaking, so it's definitely, you know, something we're gonna have to change, and it's good that we've taken all this off so we can actually see what's wrong with it. And that's confirmed to me that this is also an issue that we need to fix. Now, to get that off as well, over here what we're gonna have to do is take this stuff off here to actually take the thermostat off, and then we can move this pipe here and we should be able to slide that hose clip there off and get to it. And now, as you can see, I've managed to get the old coolant pipe off and the thermostat housing off. And so now, as you can see, I've got the old coolant pipe off, that's up here, and the end, as you can see, compared to the new one, is definitely cracked off. I think this has been replaced before, but it's probably not a very good brand, and that's why it hasn't lasted. But this one should last, and it should hold it pretty well compared to this one. I'm judging this was done probably 2016 or something like that. This is a new one here, but on this one it's got a date on production, so it says 2016 on it, so it looks like this has all been done before. I think this has all been overhauled before using cheap parts, and they've failed again. Okay then, so now we've got the inlet manifold back on, all of this stuff's back together apart from the airbox of course, which I'm going to leave for now. I'm going to move on and show you the water pump just before I put it on and compare the two of them. Here's the new water pump. As you can see, it's actually made out of alloy and metal, which is good, and it moves quite nice and smoothly. The old one, it's crap, it's made out of plastic and it's very stiff to move anyway. Poor quality water pump, and that's probably why the coolant's leaked out and it's failed. Anyway, I'm going to put this new one on then, get everything back together. I don't know why you'd make it out of plastic, which is crap quality, and it's probably not going to last, as you can tell. Anyway then, let me put everything back together under here, and we can put some coolant in and check and see if everything's okay. What I'm going to do then is check that the car's at temperature and that it can actually maintain the temperature. I'm also going to check that the friction wheel is actually engaged in the water pump. So I'm going to leave the car jacked up, run the car up to basically like 90 degrees, something like that, monitor what's going on and see if it actually engages. Let me show you then what I actually mean. This here is like a friction wheel. So what it does, it runs basically off the actual aux belt itself and puts power to try and turn that water pump. Right, so then, quick look under here, and thankfully, it looks like it's actually turned the water pump, so that's all okay now. What I'm going to do now then, I'm going to do a dye test on the car, like a leak down test, to see if the head gasket's actually leaking. Right, so then what I mean by that is basically this bit of kit here. What I'm going to do is put this dye in here, and it should come all the way down in here. I'm going to put it to about here, and then the gasket's going to come through here, and if, when it flows through here and it comes out green, that means that the head gasket's on. So I'm going to quickly put this in and we're going to see what's happening. So far then, we're looking okay. We're going to wait a couple more minutes and see how it actually turns out. It's gone a bit teal, which is a bit questionable. And here we have the results, and I don't think it's looking very good right now. Right then, so unfortunately it looks like we're going to have to do the head on the car, and I'm going to have to strip this all down, get the head off, get it skimmed and get a head gasket and do it properly. Anyway, let's make a start and get this all stripped down so we can actually get the head gasket off and have a look at how bad it actually is. So that actually confirms that the head is going. Unfortunately, that is the way it is sometimes. Anyway, what I'm going to have to do now then is I'm going to have to strip all this stuff down, try and get the head off, and then we can actually get it skimmed, see how bad it is and get a new head gasket. Anyway, let's get it off. But before we do that, right, so then guys, now what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to change out the standard Cooper S exhaust for a proper John Cooper Works one. So you can tell it's genuine because it's got it stamped on it there, because I think it will transform the car, it'll make it sound a hell of a lot nicer. And having a genuine John Cooper Works body kit on it, I feel like it's missing out on not having a proper John Cooper Works exhaust on it. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to unbolt this old exhaust, put this back box on and the centre pipe that came with it. Let's get it off. I mean, I know at this point I didn't really have to change the exhaust on the car, but I just thought it would be nice to do, and it would make the car sound better and look better, because I feel like anyone that's really interested in buying one that's a John Cooper Works, they want that exhaust on the car anyway, so I just thought I'd do it. Anyway, it's fairly easy to get off, as you can see. There's only one clamp on the front for the exhaust to undo, which holds it to the cat. Following that, there's a couple of bushes on the front that you need to take off, and pretty much two hangers on the back, and basically a cross member in the middle. Once you've removed all of that, it's fairly easy to get off, and it pretty much only takes, say, half an hour if you wanted to change the complete exhaust on it. Okay, so now we've got the exhaust on and that's all sorted. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to take this carbon fibre trim off here, and we're going to sand this down and re-lacquer it, and it should look good as new. Right then, so now we've got that on, I'm absolutely covered in filth, and I hope it's worth it. Anyway, let's start the car up and see what it sounds like. Right, okay then guys, now, so I've sorted all that stuff out, the main things are out of the way. What I also want to do is I want to get rid of this black stuff here, which I think has just been painted on. Right then, so I've literally just painted the front bumper now, I've left it overnight and I've put it all back together pretty much. Right, okay then guys, so now it's time for the teardown. What I'm going to do first then is I'm going to take the coil packs out, get the plugs out, and then I'm going to turn the engine over to top dead centre and then put a locking pin in the bottom of it, which I'll show you to hold the bottom end in top dead centre, and we can put the cam lock tool on top of here, which I'll show you once we've got all of this stuff off. After that as well, we're going to get all this valve cover off and basically lock the cam in place and sort all of that stuff out and mark it all up so we know roughly where everything's meant to be. Underneath the engine and beside the bell housing, just underneath the downpipe here, there is two sort of dowel pin holes, as you can see here, and in the top one is where we want to locate the crank locking tool for the bottom end. Literally just slid in perfectly where it is, given it a couple of checks, and it seems okay to me. So now I've got the bottom end locked in place, we can go back up top and get everything off. Right then, so time to get everything off up the top. It's going to be a hell of a long-winded process, but we should get there in the end anyway, shouldn't we? Anyway, let's get this head off. So when we're tearing the engine down, the most painful thing about doing all of this is that all the stuff that I just changed out and put back on, such as the airbox and basically the charge pipe from the turbo, all of it had to go back on, only to take it off later down the line. Anyway, following this, after taking all of the exhaust box, inlet and all of that stuff off, I took the coil packs out, the wiring looming, moved all of that stuff out of the way. Following that, the hardest part of all of this was actually removing the turbo, as there were so many little bolts and they were all pretty much tucked away under there and they're really tricky to get to. I ended up getting there in the end though, as you can see, but it did take quite a long time to get all those little bolts off because they're right tucked away under there where the cat is, alongside all the heat shield bolts, and they were all pretty rusty and difficult to get off. Another one that was really tricky to get to was the oil feed for it, as it was only a little 8mm bolt and I had to get a really long extension on there to actually remove it. But aside from that, once I sorted all that stuff out, the turbo is easy enough just to slide straight off. Another thing then that made my life a lot easier was because the car was already hot, the exhaust bolts were quite easy to get off. Of course, I didn't work on the car straight away when it was boiling hot, but I left it for a little bit, went back to it, and they all cracked off easily without any hassle. Finally now, we've got the exhaust manifold off, inlet manifold's off, all this stuff around here is off, it's pretty much ready to come off. All I've got to do now then is take the rocker cover off, lock the cams in place, and then we should be able to take the head off and all of this stuff off here. Right, so then, we're in nowhere at top dead centre because on each one of these cams, they've each got a marking on them, as you can see, and that's meant to be at the top when the head as well is top dead centre. Bottom dead centre is in place, top dead centre is in place, so the bottom end and the top end are both in sync. That's all good. Now what I'm going to have to do then is I'm going to mark these up here, take this stuff off each side, and then I can put the cam lock tool in place and remove all the other stuff and get this head off. And so now I've got the cam lock tool in place, as you can see, and it's locked the cams in, and there's a bit of slack on the chain as well. I've put a little bit of Tipex there and there to mark it roughly in the right place, and I've removed the actual tension of the timing chain now. All I've got to do now then is undo these, I think they're E14 bolts each side, take the engine mount off, drop these down, and you should be able to undo the bolts for the head, take the cams out, fuel pump off. And so now I've got the cam sprockets off, I've undone these bolts here, and I've literally just dropped the chain down here with one of the sprockets. It's cable tied to it to hold it in place. Now then, all I've got to do before I actually undo the bolts for the head is I'm going to take the actual cams out themselves along with this here, so that when it comes to skimming it, it can sit flat on the bed. We can also have a look at what the valves are doing. So I'm going to take all of these off, and it should be just undoing these bolts along here. I think they're E12 by the look of it. Get that off, and we should be able to whack the head straight off. Right then, so it's time for the grand finale now, where I can undo the bolts for the head and get this off. Right then, so we've got the head off the car now, and I've had a good look around to try and figure out where the head's actually gone. It looks like here it's got quite a bit hot, but I don't think that that's the issue. But the thing that I think is where it's gone is just here. As you can see, it looks like it's got quite hot there, and it looks like it's been burning through maybe this little bit here. And on that there, on the actual head itself, it looks like it's been a bit blocked up and stuff's been going through that way, like carbon and stuff like that. It might be one of those, or it might even just be the gasket itself's gone. I'm going to clean all this up and check if the flatness, make sure that that's all okay. Pretty sure the block itself will actually be alright, but my main concern is the head, which I'll show you now. Looking at the head, it doesn't actually look too bad, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it up, I'm going to check it for flatness, and then we're probably going to need to get it skimmed, to be honest. It's always nice to get it skimmed, just for peace of mind. Right then, so I've just got the head back from being skimmed, and as you can probably tell outside, it's just started to rain, which isn't ideal timing. The head's skimmed now, and I'm probably about, let's say, £150 light from all that. So I've got the new head gasket and the head bolts for it, a couple of gaskets that I needed, one for the exhaust and cat and an exhaust clamp itself. So all in that came to just over £125, so let's say £126. And then I've taken the head to get skimmed, and that was £66, and I had to get about 0.15 skimmed off it. So at this point in time as well, including all the other stuff that I've spent on the car, such as basically the water pump, thermostat and the other pipe at the back of it, we're just into about under £300 anyway, which isn't too bad. And then an extra £100 for the exhaust as well, which is say £400. Anyway, what we've got to do now then is I'll show you the head before I put it back on, and the block that's all been cleaned up now. Now then, what I've got to do basically is I've got to pretty much put everything back together. So I'll show you the head before I put it back on and the block that's all been cleaned up. And then we'll do another block test on the car, and it should be fine. There should be any issues there. Following that, we're going to put 12 months MOT in the car, and then we can put it straight up for sale. Probably with an MOT in the car, it's going to come to all in just over, well, about £400 to £500. Anyway then, let's clean the head up, get it back on the car and get this car running again. Right then, so here we have the head. It's all nice and fresh now. I just thought I'd quickly show you how the head looks and how clean it actually is. And to me, now it's absolutely perfect. And now all the blocks been cleaned down. I've literally just gone over it with some Scotch-Brite and sandpaper. It seems pretty true and pretty flat, so it just needed a quick clean up. Now what I can do, I can put the new head gasket on. Right then, so here's the new gasket. It's ready to go on. Thankfully as well, it comes with all torque specs and the tightness sequence, which we need to do. We've got the new gasket on. Now it's just time to put the head on. Okay, head's on. Now it's time to put the head bolts in. That's all the head bolts in now. What we've got to do is we've got to torque them up to spec. First of all, 30 newton meters. After that, what we're going to do is 90 degrees, and then again 90 degrees. There's a sheet that's come with it, thankfully, which is just here. So we're going to follow that sequence down there, tighten them all up, and it should be good to go. I've torqued all of these up now, and you probably didn't see that because what I had to do, I ended up having to take my phone to basically the torque range to use as a compass in terms of degrees, because I don't actually have one. So I literally just used the compass on my phone to do 90 degrees each time. And I also marked all of them before I did that, just to kind of confirm to myself that they're all okay and in the right spot. It's worked pretty well. They're all obviously half and half each time, which is 180 degrees, which is 90 degrees for 2 turns each time. Now then that I've done all that, I can put all the cameras back in, all the followers. Right then, now I've done all of that, what I can do, I can put the cams back in, all the lifters back in, and get the cam chain and all of this stuff back on together and throw everything back together. And after that, fingers crossed, it should be okay, and start the car up and see how it actually is. Now I've done all of that, what I can do, I can put all the cameras back in, all of the lifters back in, as well as timing chain, and get the engine back together now. And we'll perform another block test on the car just to confirm just that everything's okay. Right then, so I've just started the car back up, and it all seems to be running okay, thankfully. And I've just run another block test on it, and at the moment it seems to be okay, so hopefully that's the problem solved. Give it another couple of minutes, and then we'll have a look again. Right then, so a couple of minutes later, it's still a solid blue, and to me, I'd say that's more than okay. Thank God we solved that issue. Right then, so after a couple of minutes, it's still a solid blue colour, so that means the block test has come back okay, and the head gasket was actually the issue. So this is all good to go now. All we need to do is get an MOT on it. Right then, so the Mini's thrown for its MOT with flying colours, and there's nothing actually wrong with the car. A few small advices, which were just ball joints on each arm, which isn't really a concern anyway, and one reliant bulb on it. And it absolutely drives perfectly now. There's no issues with that, and we sorted everything else there mechanically as well. It's had a few other nice little touches, like I say, John Cooper Works exhaust, and some really good paperwork with it. All in, realistically, this car owes us just over 240. That's for all the exhaust, the MOT, and all the parts that we've actually replaced on it. What I've done then, I've spent the day pretty much giving it a thorough deep clean inside and outside, and making it look absolutely amazing. And I think it's going to make a really nice car for someone anyway. I'm hoping for around 4,650, but I might get a little bit less than that, of course. What I'm going to do now then is show you some good photos of the inside and outside. Anyway, let me get on, show them photos, and we'll put it up for sale and see what we can actually get for this car. So then here we have it, all complete and cleaned up. Now this car looks absolutely immaculate. Even doing simple things like cleaning up the front bumper by painting it, as well as sorting the carbon fibre diffuser out and fitting an exhaust to it, have really made it look different overall. And I ended up actually selling this car for £3,950, which isn't too bad in my opinion for a profit. I would have liked a bit more, but we can't be too greedy, can we? Anyway, I just want to say a big thank you for watching, guys, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want to see more stuff like this, don't forget to tap down below, hit like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys. See you in a bit.